Tonight the bedtime story name is the most boring holiday camp on earth. This story is amazing and deep sleep story. So, enjoy this bedtime story. Which video is good? Please like, subscribe, comment and share it to all your friends. Thanks a lot. Part 1 of 30, the discovery. Oliver found the brochure stuck in his library book about the history of paperclips. It was a single, cream-colored sheet with minimal text, the most boring holiday camp on earth for those tired of excitement. For those who crave predictable Tuesday afternoons. For souls who believe nothing happening is the ultimate luxury. Below was a simple map with a single X in a valley called the Hollow of Calm. Oliver, who considered watching paint dry an engaging weekend activity, felt a flutter in his chest. He had spent his life avoiding roller coasters, surprise parties, and any conversation involving the word adventure. This spoke to him. He booked immediately. The confirmation email read, "We are delighted you will join us in doing very little. Your itinerary is attached. It is blank. Pack sensible sweaters." Part 2 of 30, the journey to nowhere. The train to the camp was a slow, local service that stopped at every minor hamlet. The carriage was quiet, filled with the gentle rustle of newspapers and the soft clicking of knitting needles. No one spoke. It was perfect. At the final stop, Hush Junction, a bus awaited. It was not green and adventurous, but a beige, slightly faded coach. The driver, a man with a kind, unmemorable face, nodded as Oliver boarded. "Going to the camp?" the driver asked in a pleasant, medium-pitched voice. "Yes," Oliver replied. "Good," said the driver. "We'll be there in precisely 47 minutes. The scenery is consistently mild." And it was. They drove through gentle hills, past fields of wheat that waved just enough to be polite, under a sky of pleasant, non-threatening gray. It was the visual equivalent of a lukewarm cup of tea. Oliver felt his shoulders, which he hadn't realized were tense, begin to droop with contentment. Part 3 of 30, the gate of modest expectations. The bus pulled up to a simple wooden gate. The sign, in plain, unadorned lettering, stated the camp's name. There was no arch, no balloons, no cheering staff. A woman waited. She wore a gray cardigan and a smile that was neither too wide nor too small. "Oliver. Welcome. I'm Martha, your camp facilitator. Let's get you settled. There's no orientation. You'll pick it up." She led him down a gravel path that crunched softly underfoot. The cabins came into view. They were beige. They were square. They had windows. They were, Oliver thought with deep satisfaction, the most architecturally neutral buildings he had ever seen. "Your key," Martha said, handing him an ordinary, brass key. "Dinner is at 6. It will be soup. It will be adequate. You may do whatever you wish until then, which we anticipate will be very little." Part 4 of 30, the cabin of perfect adequacy. Oliver's cabin was a masterpiece of mediocrity. The bed was firm but not too firm. The blanket was a woolen blend of no distinct color. A single painting hung on the wall, a competently rendered bowl of brown pears. There was a bookshelf. Oliver examined the titles: The Microclimate of Valley Gullies, a Catalogue of Common Garden Moss, Proceedings of the 1972 Symposium on Mild Sediments. He felt a thrill. He sat in the armchair by the window. It accepted his weight without comment. He looked out at the view, a patch of grass, a single, average-sized pine tree, and a gray boulder. Nothing happened. No birds landed. No squirrels frolicked. The boulder just sat, being excellently, reliably boulder-like. Oliver sighed a sigh of pure, unadulterated joy. He had found his paradise. Part 5 of 30, dinner of quiet sustenance. The dining hall was a quiet hum of subdued cutlery. People nodded at one another, a slow, deliberate motion. The soup, as promised, was a creamy vegetable blend. It was neither too hot nor too cold, under-seasoned but not tasteless. It was, in a word, fine. Oliver sat alone, savoring the profound lack of conversation. At the next table, a woman was methodically reading a dictionary. A man was folding his napkin into progressively smaller squares. Martha walked to the front. "Good evening," she said, her voice perfectly audible but never rising. A brief, non-compelling announcement. Tomorrow's weather, overcast with a 60% chance of light drizzle, beginning around mid-morning and tapering off by late afternoon. Activity suggestion, watching the drizzle. Good night. A soft murmur of approval rippled through the room. A predictable drizzle. It was better than Christmas. Part 6 of 30, the morning of mild precipitation. Oliver woke naturally. The promised overcast sky was right on schedule, a seamless sheet of pale gray. He dressed in his sensible sweater and went to the dining hall for breakfast, plain oatmeal with a side of unsalted, unbuttered toast. It was exactly what he expected. Martha stood by the window. "The drizzle has commenced," she announced with the solemnity of a scientist observing a confirmed hypothesis. "It is light, persistent, and lacks dramatic character. Observation decks 1 and 2 are open." Oliver took his umbrella, a sturdy, beige model, and went to observation deck 1, a simple covered porch facing the lake. A few other campers were already there, sitting in spaced-out chairs. No one spoke. They simply watched, and Oliver watched. He saw the drizzle make tiny, identical dimples on the lake's surface. He heard the soft, rhythmic pat-pat-pat on the porch roof. He watched a single leaf, already brown, soak up the moisture and slowly sink a fraction of an inch. It was hypnotic. It was deeply eventful in its utter lack of events. He sat for an hour, maybe 2, time softened by the gray light and the gentle sound. He had never felt more awake to the world. Part 7 of 30, the lecture on dull rocks. After a lunch of unremarkable sandwiches, the day's activity was posted. 2 p.m. lecture, the consistent and reassuring dullness of local schist. The lecture hall was a small room with mildly uncomfortable folding chairs. The speaker, a geologist named Harold, spoke in a soothing monotone. He showed slides of gray rock. He discussed its formation over millennia in a way that was fascinatingly uneventful. He passed around a sample. Oliver held it. It was cool, heavy, and utterly lacking in sparkle or surprise. It was, Harold concluded, a rock of great integrity because it made no effort to be anything else. Oliver left feeling oddly inspired. He didn't want to be a glittering gemstone, full of drama and refraction. He wanted to be like the schist, steady, reliable, and deeply, comfortingly dull. Part 8 of 30, low-impact staring. His next scheduled activity was low-impact staring. The guide, a quiet woman named Alara, led a group to the edge of the forest. "Choose a stationary object," she whispered. "A tree, a stone, a patch of lichen. Your goal is not to see it, but to let it be seen. Don't analyze. Don't think. Just let your eyes rest upon it." Oliver chose a middling-sized pine tree. He stared. At first, his mind chattered, "It's a tree. It has bark. It's green." But as the minutes stretched, the chatter faded. He stopped seeing a tree and began to see shapes, the fractal curve of a branch, the intricate puzzle of bark, the way certain needles caught the flat light. He wasn't bored. He was immersed. The tree wasn't boring, it was infinitely complex, and his quiet gaze was the key to seeing it. The low impact was on his racing thoughts, which finally, blissfully, idled to a stop. Part 9 of 30, Companions in Calmat Dinner, a perfectly serviceable casserole. Oliver found himself sharing a table with 2 other guests. Clara, a retired librarian, was verifying the index of a bird-watching guide against her own observations. "Page 147 lists the common sparrow," she said, not looking up. "I have confirmed it is, indeed, common. And sparrow-like." Arthur, a soft-spoken man, was sketching different shades of beige in a small notebook. "This is Camp Path beige," he noted, pointing with his pencil. "Distinctly more gravelly than cabin wall beige, which has a warmer, wooden undertone." Oliver felt a surge of belonging. Here were people who found profound satisfaction in the meticulous, the mundane, the exquisitely ordinary. They didn't need fireworks, they found wonder in accurate indexing and the taxonomy of neutral colors. He told them about the schist lecture. They nodded in sincere appreciation. Part 10 of 30, the Moss Journal inspired, Oliver started his own project the next day. He selected a patch of moss at the base of his average pine tree. He sat beside it with a blank notebook. His goal, to note one observation per day. Not a judgment, just a fact. Day 1, the moss is green. It is damp from yesterday's drizzle. It covers an area roughly the size of a dinner plate. It felt silly. Then it felt peaceful. He was just noting. Not improving, not criticizing, just witnessing. He sat until his thoughts stilled, and the only thing in his mind was the moss, being moss. It was the most unproductive and satisfying hour of his week. That night, for the first time in years, Oliver didn't lie in bed replaying awkward conversations or planning his tomorrow. His mind was pleasantly, mossfully empty. He slept for 9 straight hours without moving. Part 11 of 30, the rule of the camp. A week into his stay, Oliver finally worked up the courage to ask Martha about the camp's philosophy. They were walking the loop of mild contemplation, a flat, circular path through unexceptional woodland. "Martha," he began, "this place is wonderful. But what's the point?" Martha smiled her medium-sized smile. "The point, Oliver, is that there doesn't have to be one. The world shouts that you must seek thrill, find your passion, live an extraordinary life. It's exhausting. We offer a different proposition." "And what's that?" "Seek no thrill," she said, pausing to watch a very ordinary beetle cross the path, "and wonder will find you. When you stop chasing excitement, you have space to notice the quiet marvels that were always there. The perfect symmetry of the beetle's path. The way the life filters through these very standard leaves. The slow, sure growth of your moss. You're not bored, Oliver. You're finally paying attention." It clicked. The camp wasn't a celebration of boredom. It was a sanctuary from the tyranny of constant stimulation. It was a masterclass in attention. Part 12 of 30, the joy of checking. Clara invited Oliver to join her for list verification. Her project was the camp's master inventory of cutlery. They sat in the silent supply room, and Clara handed him a clipboard. Column A lists 87 soup spoons. Column B is the physical count. Our task is to make them align. Oliver took a bundle of spoons. He counted. 1, 2, 3. The metal was cool. The counting was rhythmic. He entered the number. It matched. A small, pure wave of satisfaction washed over him. Nothing was created, no problem was solved, but order was confirmed. The world was, in this one tiny way, exactly as it should be. He understood Clara perfectly now. In a chaotic world, verifying that there were indeed 87 soup spoons was a tiny, potent act of peace. Part 13 of 30, the non-event. One afternoon, the most dramatic thing in the camp's history occurred. A bench on observation deck 2 developed a slight, persistent squeak when sat upon. It was reported to Martha with the gravity of a minor infrastructure issue. A quiet meeting was held. Oliver, Clara, and Arthur watched from a respectful distance as Martha and Harold the geologist examined the bench. They did not rush. They prodded it gently. They sat on it in turns, nodding at the specific pitch of the squeak. A decision was reached. No dramatic repairs were scheduled. Instead, a small, handwritten sign was placed on the bench. "Please be advised, this bench possesses a gentle, rhythmic squeak. It may be considered a feature." Oliver felt a warm glow. The camp didn't panic or overcorrect. It observed, accepted, and integrated the slight imperfection. The squeak wasn't a problem, it was now part of the bench's character. It was a lesson in accepting the small, harmless quirks of existence without fuss. Part 14 of 30, the library of the deeply specific. Oliver discovered the camp's library. It was not like other libraries. Its sections were not fiction or history, but monographs on single subjects. He browsed titles: A Comprehensive History of the Corkboard, Wind Patterns in Valleys of Moderate Size, Volume 3, The Silent Films of Accountants, a Visual Study. He checked out a volume called The Hush, a study of mid-afternoon silence in suburban gardens. He read it in his armchair as the light faded. It was not a page-turner. It was a slow, meticulous appreciation of something almost everyone ignored. With every page, Oliver felt his own capacity for appreciation deepening. He was learning to read the world as carefully as he read this book. Part 15 of 30, the weather as narrative. Oliver began to see the weather reports not as information, but as a daily, gentle narrative. Martha's announcements were like the chapter headings of a very slow, very comforting novel. Today, persistent overcast, with a 70% chance of mist after 3 p.m. Visibility will be reduced to a pleasant, soft focus view of the middle distance. Today, a steady, light breeze from the west. Expected to rustle leaves in a consistent C minor key. Excellent for flag observation. There was no fear of storms or longing for sun. There was only the calm observation of atmospheric conditions, each with its own quality and suggested activity. Oliver found himself looking forward to them. What would the sky do today? Not much. And that was the point. The predictability was the story. Part 16 of 30, Arthur's theory of beige. Arthur showed Oliver his beige notebook. It was more than swatches, it was a taxonomy of calm. See here, Arthur said, pointing. This is dawn mist beige. It's ephemeral, almost gray. And this is worn wooden spoon beige. Warm, with a history of usefulness. Camp path beige is here, practical, granular. Cabin wall beige is here, containing, gentle. But why? Oliver asked, truly curious. Because the world screams with color, Arthur said softly. Red for danger, green for go, bright blue for tropical holidays. It's exhausting. Beige doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't shout. It simply is. It's the visual equivalent of a deep breath. To understand its variations is to understand quietude itself. Oliver looked at the world anew. He wasn't in a boring, beige place. He was in a sanctuary curated in the color of rest. Part 17 of 30, the night of the predictable stars. One night, the forecast was clear skies with standard, non-flashing star distribution. A stargazing session was announced, with the caveat, no expectation of meteors or planetary conjunctions. They gathered on blankets. Harold, the geologist, pointed not at constellations, but at the dark spaces between them. See that patch? That's a particularly empty sector of our galactic arm. Nothing of note happens there. For light years. It's wonderfully uneventful. Oliver lay back and looked. He saw the simple, timeless splendor of stars being stars. No drama, no shooting spectacle. Just steady, distant light, doing exactly what was expected of it for millennia. It was profoundly reassuring. The universe, in that moment, felt like a vast, well-run, and deeply boring clock, and he found the thought immensely comforting. Part 18 of 30, the heart of the hollow. Near the end of his second week, Oliver felt a change. The initial novelty of the boredom had worn off, replaced by something deeper, a settled, bone-deep calm. His mind, once a tangled knot of shoulds and what-ifs, felt like a still, clear pool that he realized the camp's true magic. It wasn't just the activities or the quiet. It was the permission slip. Permission to not be productive. Permission to not be interesting. Permission to simply exist, as unremarkably as a rock or a patch of moss. In granting that permission, it had freed him from a burden he hadn't known he was carrying, the burden of having to be enough for a loud, demanding world. He was enough here. Just Oliver, sitting, breathing, watching moss grow. And it was plenty. Part 19 of 30, the preparation to leave. A soft, predictable melancholy settled over Oliver as his final days approached. It wasn't a sharp sadness, but the gentle, gray feeling of a chapter ending. He mentioned it to Martha on their morning walk. "It's the predictable grief of a pleasant routine concluding," she said, nodding. "It's a valid, moderate feeling. The camp's purpose isn't to make you stay forever. It's to teach you how to carry a piece of this." She gestured to the quiet woods. "Into that." She gestured vaguely in the direction of the outside world. Oliver understood. The camp was a vaccination against frenzy. He had been given a controlled dose of profound calm, and now he had to build up his own immunity to noise. He continued his moss journal. Day 14, the moss is still green. A tiny, non-flowering plant has established itself at the northeastern edge. Progress is slow and acceptable. Writing it felt like an anchor. Part 20 of 30, the last lecture. His final lecture was titled, "The Underrated Satisfaction of Completion, Tying Off Loose Threads." It was delivered by a soft-spoken woman who knitted through her own talk. She spoke not of grand achievements, but of small, finite tasks. Darning a sock. Finishing a jigsaw puzzle. Using up the last of a notebook. "In a world of endless scrolling and open tabs," she said, her needles clicking a soft rhythm, "there is deep soul rest in something being done. It is a small, personal victory over entropy." Oliver thought of his moss journal. It would never be done, but his daily entry was a completed task. A tiny, perfect knot tied in the string of his day. He resolved to find one such completable thing to do every day at home. Part 21 of 30, the gift of the ordinary. On his last evening, after a dinner of bland but wholesome stew, Martha presented him with a small, unadorned box. "Your souvenir," she said. "Open it when you get home." Clara gave him a neatly typed list she had compiled, 10 verifiably quiet corners in the city library, with seat firmness rating. Arthur gifted him a small card with a single, perfect square of Camp Path beige painted on it, labeled on the back. There were no emotional goodbyes, just slow nods and the shared understanding of people who had been, for a time, in a secret club of the unbusy. It was adequately enjoyable, Oliver said to Arthur. Sufficiently so, Arthur agreed, with a small, definite smile. Part 22 of 30, the return to Hush Junction. The beige bus was waiting. The ride back was a mirror image of the arrival, but Oliver was different. He saw the mild hills not as boring, but as serene. The gray sky was a comforting blanket, not a dreary lid.at. Hush Junction, the driver nodded. Hope it was uneventful. It was perfectly uneventful, Oliver replied, and it was the highest praise he could give. He boarded the slow train. This time, he didn't just stare out the window. He practiced. He watched one specific tree for 3 whole stations, noting how its shape changed against the shifting, bland background. He was doing low-impact staring on the move. The calm was still with him. Part 23 of 30, the first test home was a sensory assault. The fridge hummed aggressively. A streetlight glared orange through his blind. The silence had a different texture, thin and anxious, not thick and peaceful. Oliver felt the old, frazzled feeling creep in. Then, he remembered the box. He opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a smooth, cool, gray river stone. Attached was a note from Martha, for when the world is loud. Hold this. It remembers how to be quiet. He held the stone. It was heavy. Solid. Unchanging. He closed his eyes and breathed, imagining the sound of drizzle on the lake. The frantic edge softened. The stone was an anchor. He had brought a piece of the boring camp bedrock home. Part 24 of 30, building a boring corner. Oliver didn't try to change his whole life. He started with a corner. He moved his armchair, placed a small table beside it, and put the stone and Arthur's beige swatch on it. He got a plain, beige lamp. This was his observation deck. He used Clara's list and visited the third quietest corner of the library. He sat for an hour, verifying the firmness of the chair. It was a 7/10, as she had noted. He read 3 pages of a book about typesetting. It was bliss that he began his new completable task, using a specific pen until the ink ran out. It was a pointless, wonderful mission. Every day, he'd write a few lines in a notebook, watching the ink level drop. A small, predictable countdown to a minor victory. Part 25 of 30, the unbearing truth weeks passed. Oliver was, to the outside world, the same. He went to work, did his grocery shopping, lived his life. But inside, a revolution had occurred that he no longer felt guilty for enjoying a quiet evening. He didn't feel pressure to have an interesting weekend. He found himself stopping to watch pigeons bicker, not with impatience, but with curiosity. He appreciated the slow, reliable journey of his pen running out of ink. He realized the camp's final, beautiful secret: by mastering the art of being boring, he had unlocked a profound capacity for being interested. Not in thrill, but in life itself. The texture of bread, the pattern of rain on the office window, the way his kettle clicked off. These were not distractions from life. They were the tiny, beautiful tiles that life was made of. He had learned to see them. Part 26 of 30, the rhythm of enough. Oliver settled into a new rhythm, one governed not by productivity apps, but by natural, gentle cues. He ate when he was moderately hungry. He stopped working when his focus began to wane, not when the clock said to, but when his mind gave a soft, internal sigh. He went to bed not because it was time, but when his eyelids grew pleasantly heavy. He found a small, community garden plot. He didn't aim for prize-winning vegetables. He planted slow-growing, reliable things, potatoes that grew unseen, and herbs that were content to be green. Tending to them was a weekly, quiet ritual of checking, not achieving. The garden was a lesson in doing one's part and then trusting the slow, boring processes of sun and soil. Life became a series of these adequate, satisfying completions. The pen finally ran out of ink. He placed the empty cartridge on his shelf, a tiny monument to patience. The feeling was not of excitement, but of deep, solid contentment. Part 27 of 30, the unexpected visitor. One rainy Saturday, a colleague from work, a woman named Sarah who was always vibrating with nervous energy, stopped by unexpectedly. She talked a mile a minute about office drama, her frantic weekend plans, her anxiety about an upcoming presentation. Oliver listened quietly. Then, he said, "Would you like a cup of tea? It's just a basic breakfast blend." He moved slowly to the kitchen. He placed the smooth camp stone on the table between them. He didn't explain it. He just made the tea, the ritual of boiling water and steeping leaves creating a bubble of quiet in the frantic conversation. Sarah slowly ran out of words. She watched him pour. She took the mug. She glanced at the stone. For the first time since she arrived, she took a full, deep breath. "Your place is so calm," she said, her voice lower. "It's adequately calm," Oliver agreed. They sat in silence for a few minutes, drinking tea. She left not energized, but settled. Oliver hadn't solved her problems. He had simply held a space where they didn't need to be solved right away. He had shared his boring piece, and it had been a gift. Part 28 of 30, the legacy of the moss. Oliver continued his moss journal, but now for the patch in his community garden. Observation number 42, moss has spread approximately 1 inch to the west. It is thriving in a consistent shade of the fence. A small, ordinary beetle has taken up residence. He realized the journal was no longer just about moss. It was a record of his own sustained attention. It was proof that he could stick with something not because it was exciting, but because it was there, and worthy of a quiet, consistent regard. He sometimes thought of Clara, Arthur, and Martha. He pictured Clara verifying another index, Arthur discovering a new shade of dusk pavement gray, Martha announcing a week of uniform cloud cover. He smiled. They were out there, guardians of the mundane, and knowing that made the world feel like a kinder, more sensible place. Part 29 of 30, the most interesting boredom. Years later, Oliver was, by the world's standards, a boring man. He had a modest job, a quiet home, and routines as predictable as the tides. And he was deeply, profoundly happy. One evening, his young niece was visiting, overwhelmed by the noise and speed of her life. "I'm bored," she declared, flinging herself on the sofa, meaning it as a complaint. "Ah," said Oliver, putting down his book. "Boredom is an excellent sign. It means your mind has run out of other people's entertainment and is ready to make its own. Would you like to see something genuinely boring?" Intrigued, she followed him to the garden. He showed her the moss patch and his journal. He gave her a magnifying glass. "Tell me one thing you see that you've never noticed before." She grumbled, but looked. 10 minutes later, she was still there. "Uncle Oliver," she whispered, "the moss isn't just green. It's like a million tiny trees. And there's a whole world in there." He nodded. He had given her the first, most valuable lesson, that wonder isn't found by chasing the extraordinary, but by looking, properly looking, at the ordinary. He had passed on the gift of the boring camp. The last part of the story, the holiday that never ended. Oliver, now an old man, sat in his armchair in the corner he had built decades ago. The stone was still on the table, worn even smoother by a lifetime of touch. The beige paint on the walls had faded to a perfect, soft lived-in peace. He wasn't thinking of grand adventures or dramatic life events. He was thinking of the feel of the camp's gravel path underfoot. The sound of Martha's voice announcing drizzle. The weight of the schist sample in his hand. The profound friendship of people who asked nothing of him but his quiet company. He realized then that the holiday had never ended. The most boring holiday camp on earth had not been a 2-week trip. It had been a training in how to live. He had spent the rest of his life on that holiday, finding the camp in every quiet moment, every completed task, every patch of moss, every cup of adequately hot tea. The greatest adventure, he had learned, was not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And the most boring holiday camp on earth had given him the clearest, calmest, most interested eyes he could have ever hoped for. He closed his eyes, the ghost of a medium-sized, perfectly adequate smile on his face. Outside, a predictable, gentle rain began to fall. It was, as always, exactly enough. Thanks to watching this sleepy story. Which video is good? Please like, subscribe and share it to all your friends. Thanks a lot.